In front of 400 wedding guests, she reached out and tore a woman's dress. Not by accident, not in anger she couldn't control. She planned it. She walked across the room smiling. She got close enough, and she did it. She wanted Nadia humiliated. She wanted her to feel small just once, just for a moment, the way she herself had felt small every time Nadia entered a room without even trying. She got what she wanted. For about 24 hours. And then the consequences came. Quietly. From a direction she never looked. Because here's the question she never thought to ask herself before she reached out her hands. When you humiliate a woman in public, do you ever stop to ask who raised her? If you're new here, welcome to Afro-Korean Noir Stories. This is the channel where love is fierce, loyalty is everything, and the wrong move has consequences that last a lifetime. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Now, let's get into it. The night Park Jae-won met Adae's, it was raining. He hadn't planned to go inside the gallery. His car was late. The rain came down fast and hard, the kind that soaks you before you decide to move. So he stepped through the nearest door, pulled out his phone, and stood near the entrance in his black coat with water still running off the shoulders. He was not interested in art. He was not interested in anything in that room. And then he heard the laugh. It stopped him cold. Not because it was loud, because it was real. The kind of laugh that comes from the stomach and refuses to be polished. The kind that fills a room not because it's trying to, but because it simply can't help it. He looked up from his phone. She was standing in front of a large painting, a Lagos market scene, rich with warm oranges and deep brown tones. She had one hand pressed lightly to her chest, laughing at something the curator beside her had just said. She wore a burnt orange dress that sat against her dark skin the way color sits against warm velvet, glowing. Lit from somewhere inside. Her hair was gathered up, a few loose coils framing her face. Gold earrings caught the gallery light every time she turned her head. Jae-won put his phone in his pocket. He did not go to her immediately. That was not who he was. He moved to the nearest painting and stood in front of it, appearing to look at it, seeing nothing. He watched her instead, from the edge of his vision. She moved through the room slowly, unhurried. She stopped long in front of every piece, giving it her full attention the way some people give another person their full attention, rarely and completely. She spoke to the curator in careful Korean, clearly learned and clearly worked for. Then, in the same breath, she turned and spoke Yoruba to the older woman beside her. The shift was so natural it barely registered as a change at all. 2 languages, moving between them like water through open hands. Jae-won was 31 years old. He had been reading people his entire adult life. It was how he had survived, how he had built what he built, how he had become the kind of man that other powerful men avoided looking directly at. And in 7 minutes of watching this woman, he understood something he would have said that morning he did not believe in. She was completely, entirely herself. No performance, no calculation, just her. He introduced himself 40 minutes later. She didn't look up when he approached. "You've been standing in front of that piece for 6 minutes, she said. "Either you love it or you hate it, and you can't decide which." "I was looking at you," he said. "The painting gave me an excuse." Then she turned. She looked at him directly, not with flattery, not with the pleased flutter most women performed when a powerful man showed interest. She simply looked at him, calmly, deciding what she thought. "Park Jae-won," he said, and extended his hand. "I know who you are," she said, and then she took it. "Hades Okonkwo, I'm not impressed by names." He almost smiled. "I know. That's why I told you mine." Her name was Adae's. She was 27, a cultural liaison with the Nigerian embassy. She had a degree in African art history from Lagos and a master's from Edinburgh. She had been in Korea 4 months and had decided, in the stubborn and total way she did most things, to learn the language properly, not tourist phrases, the whole thing. They talked for 2 hours. The gallery emptied around them. The curator dimmed the lights twice. Neither of them noticed. She knew what he was. He told her the truth when she asked quietly, directly, without dressing it up. She was silent for a long time afterward. Then she said, "I'm not going to ask you to be someone else. But I need to know the person sitting across from me right now is real. Not a role. He's real, Jaewon said. He's the only real thing I have. She called him 3 days later. She said, Thursday, 7. You pick the place, but if it has a private room you're trying to show off, I'm leaving immediately. He chose a small noodle shop in Mapo, 2 stools at a counter. A bowl of broth that made her close her eyes on the first sip. 14 months later, she wore white silk with gold thread at their wedding. Korean and Igbo tradition together in one ceremony, a beautiful, chaotic, lovingly argued compromise. He wept during the vows. He let people see it. 18 months after that, she went into labor on a rainy Tuesday evening. The delivery was long. It became complicated. Doctors moved quickly with the focused, grim energy of people managing something serious. Jaewon stood outside the door and did something he hadn't done since he was a child. He prayed. The baby arrived just after midnight. 8 pounds and 4 ounces, screaming at the world for having the nerve to receive her. Perfect. Hades held her for 11 minutes. She smiled the whole time. She traced her daughter's face with one finger, the soft nose, the full lips, the tiny fist that curled around her thumb without being asked. Look at her, she said to Jaewon, who sat on the edge of the bed, holding them both with his eyes because his arms weren't enough. She got everything. She got you, he said. Adaze looked up at him. Her voice was calm. Take care of her. With everything I am, he said. She closed her eyes. She did not open them again. Jaewon sat in the chair beside the empty bed and held his daughter through the rest of the night. He didn't speak. He didn't move, just held her against his chest while the rain had already stopped and Seoul moved on outside the window, indifferent and continuous, the way cities are. He looked at his daughter's face, the deep brown of her skin, the thick lashes already resting on her cheeks, the total, absolute trust of her sleep. And he understood something in that moment that rearranged everything inside him. She was the most dangerous thing in his life. Not because she was a weapon, because she was a wound. The one wound that would never close. The one place where someone could reach through all his armor and destroy him completely simply by touching her. He named her Nadia Adaeze Park. He pressed his lips to her forehead, and in a voice barely above a whisper, in a room that only the two of them would ever know about, he made her a promise. The world will learn what it means to harm what is mine. He meant every word. By the time Nadia Park was 24 years old, walking into a room behind her was a different experience for everyone already inside it. She didn't announce herself. She didn't have to. She was 5'9", with her father's stillness not rigid, just settled. The natural carriage of someone who has never once had a reason to make themselves smaller. Her skin was the color of dark honey warmed in afternoon light, deep and rich and luminous, the kind that seemed to carry its own warmth from inside. Her mother's Igbo blood gave her the full architecture of her face, lips that curved without effort, a broad, elegant nose, cheekbones that sat high and clean. Her father's Korean lineage lived in the beautiful tilt of her eyes, dark as still water at night, and in a certain composed quietness in her expression that was not coldness, it was depth. The way a lake can be perfectly calm on the surface while something enormous moves underneath. She wore her hair in thick, natural coils. She favored deep colors, wine red, forest green, midnight blue. She spoke Korean like someone born to it, English like someone schooled in it, and Yoruba like someone who had learned it with love from recordings and old videos and her father's patient, sometimes tearful coaching across a dining table, because he had decided early that Adie's language would live in their daughter even if Adie's herself could not. She knew she was beautiful. She didn't use it as a weapon. She simply carried it the way she carried her name, as something given to her that she'd done nothing to earn but had decided to honor. What she rarely thought about was what stood behind her. Park Jae-won's daughter, the only child of the most feared man in the Korean underworld. She had grown up inside his protection the way most children grow up inside walls without seeing them, without needing to, because nothing had ever gotten through. She was loved, completely, fiercely, without condition. And that is what made her the wrong woman to humiliate. Because a woman loved like that doesn't shrink. She doesn't perform weakness to make other people comfortable. She stands still. She waits. And she lets her father do the rest. Nadia was 8 years old when the moving truck appeared next door. She watched from her bedroom window, chin in her hands, eyes sharp with the focused attention she gave everything. As men in blue uniforms carried boxes and furniture through the gate of the house that had sat empty for 6 months. Then she saw the boy. He was deposited on the front step by a woman who was clearly his mother, clearly overwhelmed, and clearly giving instructions that meant, sit there and don't move. He sat there for 4 minutes. Then he stood up and began walking the edge of the garden, picking up stones, examining them, setting them back down. Nadia watched this for a while. Then she went downstairs, crossed to the low hedge between the two properties, and called out, "What are you looking at?" He startled, nearly fell, caught himself and turned around. He was her age, maybe a year older. Round at the jaw, ears that stuck out slightly, eyes that were direct and attentive, in a way most boys his age hadn't grown into yet. He didn't look embarrassed at being caught. "A beetle," he said. "Is it interesting?" He thought about it seriously, like the question actually deserved an answer. "Yes, it has a pattern I haven't seen before." She walked to the hedge and looked over. Even from there, she could see it glossy black, faint iridescent markings on the shell. "It's a Carabus beetle," she said. "My teacher showed me a picture." He looked up at her. "How do you know that?" "I read a lot," she said. "My name is Nadia. Lee-un," he pointed at the house. "We just moved." "I know. I watched the truck." He stood up and came toward the hedge. No performance of friendliness. No attempt to make her like him. Just the honest assessment of a boy deciding whether this person was worth his time. "Do you know anything else about beetles?" "A few things," she said. "Okay," he said. "Tell me." That was it. That was all it took. By the end of the week, he had seen her father's koi pond enormous, still, beautiful, and she had inspected his collection of miniature cars and told him they were fine but less interesting than the beetle. They enrolled in the same school that autumn. From that morning forward, they were inseparable. They sat beside each other, ate beside each other, walked home side by side every afternoon, with black cars trailing at a respectful distance, her cars, her security, because her father never sent her anywhere alone. Lee-un accepted this the same way he accepted everything about her, without drama, without questions. He didn't need answers to. It was simply part of what it meant to be near Nadia. He was quiet, he wasn't dramatic, but when it mattered, he was exactly where she needed him. In 3rd grade, a group of older boys cornered Nadia at the edge of the school field, 5 of them, bigger, older. The kind of boys who smell difference and decide it means weakness. They made comments about her skin, her hair, the fact that she wasn't like them and never would be. Lee-un appeared. He didn't shout, didn't run. He walked through the gap in the group and placed himself between Nadia and the boy at the front, hands in his pockets, face completely flat. "Walk away," he said. Like he was commenting on the weather. The boy in front took 1 step back. He didn't know why, he just did. They all left. Lee-un turned around. Nadia was looking at him steadily. "You saw them yesterday," she said, not a question. "I noticed them watching you," he said. She nodded once. They walked back to the school building. He fell into step beside her, exactly where he always was. Neither of them said anything else about it. They didn't need to. Here is what Lee-un never knew. His family hadn't moved to that street by accident. His father, Lee Tae-soo, had business interests that had become quietly and permanently entangled with Park Jae-won's operations years earlier. A restructured debt, a silent partnership, a favor exchanged in the language men of a certain world speak between themselves. The move had been suggested gently, clearly, in the way Jae-won suggested things, and Lee Tae-soo had agreed without hesitation. But Lee-un grew up believing it was simply his father's career. A better house, a better school. By the time he was old enough to suspect otherwise, he had known Nadia for a decade, and the truth no longer mattered as much as the fact of her. Lee-un was 19 when Soo-min entered his life. She arrived the way most arrangements do, presented as natural when they were anything but. Their families had known each other for years. Soo-min's father ran a construction business with interests overlapping Lee Tae-soo's firm. The 2 men had met at industry dinners, played golf on weekends, discussed their children the way men of their world discussed assets, with a practical eye on alignment and return. By the time Lee Un and Su Min sat across from each other at a family dinner for the first time, every adult in the room already knew what the evening was for. Su Min was beautiful. No one could say otherwise. Her face was high and fine, perfectly assembled, every detail exactly where it should be. She was pleasant, charming, skilled at reading what a room needed and giving it that. She liked Leon genuinely. He was kind, steady, good-looking, and he treated her consistently well. She liked the version of herself that existed in his company. But the first time she saw Nadia, the first real time, not a photo, not a mention, but the actual woman walking into a room, something shifted in Su Min's chest that she had not been prepared for. It wasn't the beauty. She could manage beautiful women. She had done it her whole life. It was the way Lee Un changed. His posture shifted. His shoulders dropped. The performance of ease he wore everywhere, the collected, composed version of himself he showed to rooms, simply fell away the second Nadia arrived. What was underneath wasn't excitement. It wasn't desire, not on the surface. It was something quieter and far more frightening. It was peace. The deep, bone-level peace of someone who has finally stopped holding something in. Su Min looked at this from across the dinner table and named it immediately, privately, in the language she used only inside her own head. Threat. She didn't show it. She smiled at Nadia that first evening. She complimented her earrings. She asked about her work with the warm, bright interest of a woman who has decided she isn't afraid. But she was afraid. And underneath the fear was something harder. Something that had nowhere to go, so it sat there and built. She was patient about it, careful. She made quiet comments to Lee Un that sounded like questions. Nadia seems very attached to you. Is it always like that? I just want to understand the friendship. She arranged their social calendar so that events Nadia was likely to attend kept getting rescheduled. She was warm to Nadia's face and deliberate about the distance she maintained when Lee Un wasn't watching. She never did one thing, not once, in 3 years. She never asked who Nadia's family was. She never asked what name she carried, never thought to look behind the woman in front of her. She saw a beautiful, mixed-race woman who was too close to her boyfriend. That was all she ever looked for. That was all she ever saw. This was her mistake. It was the only one she needed to make. Lee Un and Su Min married on a Saturday in May, at a Gangnam venue Su Min had chosen 8 months earlier and redesigned twice. The ceilings were vaulted and draped in cream fabric. Blush flowers covered every surface. Candlelight moved in the long mirrors lining both walls. 400 guests. 3 outfit changes planned for the bride. Nadia came because Lee Un had called her personally, 1 week before. I know it's a strange ask, he said. He didn't explain what he meant by strange. It's not strange, she said. You're my friend. I'll be there. She chose a deep emerald wrap dress. Elegant, simple, nothing that competed. Small gold earrings, heels. She looked exactly like herself, which had always been the problem for some people, because herself was remarkable. She sat at a table in the middle of the room with Lee Yoon's university friends. She smiled during the ceremony. She applauded at the right moments. She drank her champagne and talked warmly with the people around her. She did not once allow herself to look at Leon's face during the vows in a way that meant anything she didn't want it to mean. She was doing well. The evening was almost over. Then Su Min found her. She crossed the reception floor with a champagne flute in one hand and a smile so warm it could have fooled anyone. The overhead chandelier threw gold light across the whole room. The string quartet in the corner was playing something soft and elegant. This was the height of the evening, everything perfect, everything hers. She stopped in front of Nadia. You look lovely, she said. Su Min. Nadia turned, open and genuine. Congratulations. It's a beautiful wedding. I wanted to ask you something. Su Min stepped closer. Her smile didn't change. How do you afford to dress like this? International business consulting can't pay that well. The words were pleasant. The meaning was a blade. Nadia felt it land. She chose not to react. I do well enough, she said. I'm sure. Sumin said. And then, faster than a breath, faster than anyone in her immediate vision could track, she reached out, gripped the fabric at the side of Nadia's dress, and pulled. The sound of tearing silk in a quiet conversation is surprisingly loud. The emerald dress split from the waist to the hip. A long, clean tear. Deliberate. Final. Nadia went completely still. A server 2 steps away had seen it. 2 women at the bar had seen it. The string quartet played on. Sumin stepped back, both hands flying to her mouth, eyes going wide. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just touching the fabric and I didn't mean..." She couldn't finish it. She was already scanning the room, calculating who had seen, whether accident was still a story she could sell. Nadia looked at her, not with anger, not with tears, with the complete, absolute composure of a woman raised in a house where control wasn't a virtue, it was a survival skill. A house where the man at the head of the table had never needed to raise his voice to make a consequence land. She said nothing. She reached into her clutch, found a small safety pin, fastened the tear in 2 careful movements, smoothed the dress, and walked to the restroom. She fixed what she could. She looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. Then she took out her phone, and she typed one message. To one person. Her father. Park Jae-won read the message once. He set the phone down on his desk. He folded his hands in his lap. He sat in complete silence for 30 seconds. Here is what you need to understand about men like him. The silence wasn't hesitation. It wasn't uncertainty. The silence was the thing that came before the decision was executed, the brief pause of a man who has already arrived at the end and is simply giving the beginning room to breathe. He picked the phone back up. He made one call. Find everything on the O family. Father's name. Construction business. I want it in 2 hours. End. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He spoke the way he always spoke, quietly, completely, in the tone of a man who has never once needed to repeat himself. The information arrived in 90 minutes. The following Monday morning, Oh Sung-jin Sumin's father walked into a meeting he had not requested and had not been given the option to decline. The room had no windows, a single table, 2 chairs. Jae-won's men stood near the door with the relaxed posture of people who do not perform threat because they simply are it. Jae-won placed a document on the table. Your company holds 3 government contracts, he said, in a conversational tone. 2 were awarded through a bidding process I now have substantial documentation about. The 3rd involves permits, with irregularities that would be very uncomfortable under scrutiny. Oh, Sung-jin's face had gone the color of paper. His hands were flat on the table. He didn't trust them to stay still in his lap. Your daughter tore my daughter's dress, Jae-won continued. In public, at a wedding, deliberately. He let that word sit there for a moment. Just sit. I want you to understand what that word means to me. It means someone made a decision, a conscious, intentional decision to humiliate what is mine. A long silence. The dress will be replaced. The exact piece from the exact designer. Plus every cost my daughter incurred managing the situation. Done within the week. He stood and buttoned his jacket. As for the contracts, that is a matter of what choices your family makes going forward. I suggest making careful ones. He looked at Oh Sung-jin one last time. No anger in his eyes, no heat at all. Just the calm, complete certainty of a man who has never once needed anger to make a point land. Tell your daughter, he said, that before a woman reaches out and touches something, she should find out what it belongs to first. He walked out. Oh, Sung-jin sat in the empty room for 4 minutes. The overhead light buzzed softly. The document on the table didn't move, neither did he. Not until his legs agreed to carry him. Sumin received the dress bill on Friday. She received her father's destroyed silence that same evening. And over the days that followed, she received the slow, cold understanding of exactly whose daughter she had put her hands on. She barely slept for 3 nights. She replayed the moment on the reception floor, the reach, the grip, the sound of the fabric over and over, and each time, the understanding settled a little deeper. She had stood in a room full of people and grabbed the dress of the only daughter of Park Jae-won. The Park Jae-won. She had thought she was taking something back. She had no idea what she had reached into. 3 months after the wedding, Lee Un called Nadia. It was past 11 at night. She was in her apartment, a book open in her lap, when his name appeared on her screen. She looked at it for a moment. Then she answered. "I need to tell you something," he said, no greeting. He never used small talk when he was serious. "Then tell me," she said. A long pause. She could hear him breathing, hear the texture of what he was working up to, the particular weight a person carries when they have held something so long, the holding has become its own kind of exhaustion. "I think I've been in love with you," he said, "for a long time. I don't know when it started. I don't know if it had a start. Maybe it was always already there, built into every year I've known you, and I only just turned around and actually looked at it." Nadia set the book down. She looked at the wall across from her. Outside, Seoul moved through its nighttime rhythm, distant traffic, a plane somewhere above, the low hum of a city that never fully rests. The apartment was warm. The lamp on her side table threw a soft amber circle of light across the floor. She thought about the hedge, the beetle, 8-year-old Lee Un turning to look at her with those direct, careful eyes and deciding she was worth talking to. She thought about every walk home, every dinner, every time he had appeared exactly where she needed him without being asked. 16 years. "Lee Un," she said. "You're married." "I know." Something underneath his voice was cracking at the seams carefully, quietly, the way structures crack when they've held weight for too long. "I know. And I'm not asking you for anything. I just needed you to know. Because I've spent 15 years not saying it, and I realized that's 15 years of being afraid of it. And I don't want to be afraid of it anymore." She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that he began to wonder if he had been wrong about everything. "I know," she said. Softly. Just those 2 words. He exhaled. Long and slow. Like something physically released. "Have you?" he started. "Yes," she said. Simply, without apology, without anything extra. Another silence. The kind that isn't empty. The kind full of everything that has just shifted between 2 people and can't be put back. "I have to figure out what I'm doing," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm not going anywhere. I never have been." The marriage between Lee Un and Soo-min lasted 14 more months after that phone call. It didn't end in one dramatic moment. It ended the way things end when they were built on family convenience rather than truth, gradually, by mutual, exhausted acknowledgement, in a quiet conversation that both of them had known was coming for a long time. They signed the papers on a gray Tuesday morning, handshakes with lawyers, separate doors. Lee Un called Nadia on Thursday. "I'm done being careful about the wrong things," he said. "Come over," she said. "I'll make tea." He came over. They sat in her apartment until nearly 3 in the morning, talking about everything: the hedge, the beetle, the koi pond, the miniature cars. 16 years of a friendship that had been quietly and stubbornly and extraordinarily in love with itself the entire time. All the moments that, in hindsight, had been leaning toward this one. He didn't kiss her that night. He was deliberate about that. He wanted her to know this wasn't impulse, wasn't rebound, wasn't the reckless thing that looks like love but runs out before breakfast. He wanted her to know he was choosing her the way he chose anything he intended to keep. Completely. Carefully. Without any part of himself held back. He kissed her 3 weeks later, on a bridge in Mapo, in the rain. Because they had been walking and talking, and he had simply reached the end of what he could hold. She let him. And then she kissed him back fully, warmly, without a single apology. When Lee Un came to the park compound to ask Jae-won for his daughter's hand, he was shown into the study. Jae-won sat behind a wide, uncluttered desk, bookshelves on 2 walls. A single photograph on the corner of the desk, a woman in a burnt orange dress, laughing at something, gold earrings catching the light. Lee Un recognized the dress from a story Nadia had told him. He understood what he was looking at. He told Jae-won what he had come to say. He didn't rush it. He didn't dress it up. He spoke directly, the way he had learned to speak from watching the man across from him, though he hadn't known that was what he was doing. Jae-won listened without moving. When Lee-eun finished, Jae-won was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and came around the desk. He put both hands on Lee-eun's shoulders. And Park Jae-won, the most feared man in the Korean underworld, the man whose stillness made powerful people sweat, wept. He didn't look away. He didn't try to stop it. "She needs someone who will stay," he said when he could speak. "Not someone who loves her because she is beautiful. Someone who loves her because she is whole. Do you understand the difference?" "Yes," Lee-eun said, without hesitation. Jae-won studied him for a long moment, the way he studied everything, completely, without hurry, missing nothing. Then he nodded once and went back around the desk and picked up the phone. "I know a venue in the mountains," he said. "I'll make some calls." The wedding was planned for autumn, a venue in the hills outside Seoul stone walls, warm timber beams, wide windows looking out across forested hillsides turning amber and gold as October settled in. Clean air, real quiet. The kind of beautiful that doesn't need to be announced. Nadia's dress was the centerpiece, custom. 3 months in the making. Ivory silk with hand-embroidered gold thread running along the bodice and trailing into the skirt, subtle and extraordinary at the same time. The kind of garment that exists to serve the person wearing it. When Hayron, the stylist, brought the first completed fitting, Nadia stood in front of the mirror for nearly a full minute without speaking. "It's exactly right," she said finally. "It was made for exactly you," Hayron said, which was simply the truth. Soo-min heard about the wedding through a mutual connection. She didn't RSVP. She didn't need to. She had been building toward this for months, quietly, methodically. The same patient management she applied to everything, except this time there was no strategy underneath. This time it was just the rage. The cold, solid rage of a woman who had watched the thing she wanted most in the world be handed to the person she resented most. Without drama, without justice, just handed over, like it was obvious. Like it had always been heading there. She had no access to the venue. She had no access to anyone on the guest list. She was smart enough not to try. But she found the gap. The stylist. She researched Hayron carefully. She found the boutique. She found the booking. She found the arrival time and the service entrance used by vendors. She bought a professional styling kit. She had her hair done differently. She drove to the venue 2 days beforehand and watched the service entrance from the road, timing the rotations, watching how vendors were received. On the morning of the wedding, she arrived at 6:15 a.m. Before Hayron, before most of the setup crew. She was dressed in the dark uniform of a professional, a bag over her shoulder, her face arranged into the calm, efficient expression of someone who belongs exactly where they are. She told the vendor coordinator she was a last-minute addition to the styling team, an extra pair of hands, booked through the boutique. The coordinator, managing a florist whose van was 40 minutes late and a delivery of candles that hadn't arrived, waved her through without looking up. She was inside the bridal suite 20 minutes before Hayron got there. She found the dress on its mannequin form near the window, where the morning light made the gold embroidery glow. She looked at it for a moment, the silk, the careful embroidery, 3 months of work. Something made specifically for one specific person. She reached into the styling bag, found what she'd brought, and she opened the back panel of the dress in one clean motion. In the adjacent room, Nadia sat with her father. Jae-won had asked for 10 minutes before the ceremony. Just the two of them, the way it had always been. Since the night he'd sat in a hospital chair holding her against his chest and made her a promise. He gave her a small velvet box. Inside was a bracelet. Gold, with small amber stones. Simple and solid. The same one from the photograph on his desk. "Your mother wore this," he said. "In the picture you've seen 1,000 times." Nadia looked at it. She looked at her father. She pressed her lips together for a moment, because she had decided that morning she wasn't going to cry before the ceremony, and she had meant it. She put the bracelet on her wrist and held it up so the window light caught the amber. "Tell me about the dress she wore," she said. "When you married." And Jae-won told her. He always told her. Every detail, every memory, the gallery, and the rain, and the noodle shop, and the laugh, and the Edinburgh degree, and the Yoruba lessons, and the wedding, and the pregnancy, and the 11 minutes. He'd told it so many times, with such deliberate and precise love, that Nadia knew her mother the way you know a place you've never been but have been described so perfectly you can close your eyes and find your way through it. Outside in the corridor, one of Jaewon's men stood at the corner junction where the corridor met the bridal suite standard positioning, routine, the kind of thing done without discussion at any event involving this family. He heard a sound from inside the suite. Not loud, just wrong. He had the door open in 3 seconds. He was across the room in 4 more. He caught Soo-min by the wrist before she reached the exit. The dress hung on the mannequin behind her. The back panel split open. A 7-inch tear, clean and deliberate, the cutting tool already returned to the bag at her feet. Soo-min didn't fight. There was nothing left to fight with. She stood there in her professional uniform, in the warm autumn light coming through the windows, and she understood in the way you only understand certain things when they are already irreversible, that she had made an enormous mistake. Again. Hae-rin arrived 40 seconds later. She saw the dress. She made a sound like something physical had happened to her. She stood in the center of the room, with both hands pressed against her face, and the chandelier above her threw cold, clear light over everything, the torn silk, the careful embroidery split open, 3 months of work undone in one motion. She stood there for 4 seconds. Then something changed in her expression. Not resignation. The opposite. She crossed to her secondary case, the one she'd brought on instinct, the habit of 8 years in this industry telling her without words that you always bring something more than you think you'll need. She opened it. She lifted out the piece she hadn't planned to use. It was a silk gown in ivory gold, not the pale moonlight of the original, but something warmer and deeper, a richer tone, like sunrise rather than evening. The structure was different, a fitted bodice, clean and precise, releasing into a dramatic column that trailed behind. No embroidery, none needed. The kind of dress that doesn't decorate the person wearing it. It frames them and then gets out of the way. Hae-rin looked at it. She looked at the door to the adjacent room. She went to it and knocked. Nadia heard everything. She stood in the doorway of the adjacent room and looked at the torn dress. She looked at the man holding Soo-min near the exit. She looked at Soo-min herself standing there in the costume of a professional, hands still, face finally, completely empty of anything that looked like strategy. Nadia didn't speak to her. Not one word. She looked at Hae-rin instead. Then at the gold dress in Hae-rin's hands. She crossed the room. She touched the fabric with the tips of her fingers. She held it up in the window light. She looked at it for a long moment, the way she looked at things when she was deciding something, and then she nodded. "Put it on me," she said. When Nadia Park walked out of that venue on her father's arm 19 minutes later, the assembled guests went quiet. Not because someone asked them to, because something real was moving toward them and the body knows before the mind does. The ivory gold silk caught the October light between the trees and held it. The amber bracelet on her wrist, her mother's, glowed warm against her skin. Her hair was a high crown of coils, pinned with small gold pieces. She wasn't the bride from the original plan. She was something better. She was entirely, completely herself, which had always been the most magnificent thing she could possibly be. Lee-eun watched her come down the aisle. He didn't compose his expression into something more restrained. He didn't try. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her, since they were 8 years old, like someone worth staying for, worth figuring out, worth every single year that had been pointing toward this one. She reached him. She took his hands. The dried pine needles on the aisle path crunched softly beneath her last step. The mountain air was cool and sharp and smelled like cedar and autumn earth. "You changed the dress," he said. "The dress changed," she said. "I didn't." He smiled. The real one, the one she'd seen 10,000 times across a hedge and a school desk and a dinner table. "No," he said. "You never do." The police arrived before the first hour of the reception was over. Jaewon had made one call calm, brief, to a contact in the prosecutor's office. He described the events of the morning clearly and completely. His man had footage. The bridal suite had a security camera. positioned as routine at any event involving this family. Clear footage. Sumin's face, the cutting tool, the tear, the deliberate motion, all of it. He added, the prior incident, the first wedding, the first dress, the same woman, a pattern, 2 deliberate acts, documentation for both. The charges: destruction of property, criminal trespass, fraudulent impersonation of a service professional to gain access to a private event, and evidence of deliberate, repeated targeting. The case was clean. The evidence was complete. It was not a complicated trial. Su-min was convicted 3 months later. 18 months imprisonment. She served 14. When she was released, she left Korea. No one tracked where she went. No one needed to. The reception ran until nearly midnight, under strings of warm amber lights strung between the trees, with tables set out across the stone terrace. Korean and Igbo food side by side, 2 traditions that had been separated by an ocean and reunited in one woman, placed on the same table because both of them deserved to be there, and Nadia had never been asked to choose between them. Near the end of the evening, when the older guests had found their seats and the music had slowed and the mountain air had dropped to the cool, clean stillness that comes in the hills after dark, Jae-won asked his daughter to dance. He was not a graceful dancer. He had never been. Ada-Ease had found this endlessly funny, had imitated him at their own reception until he laughed so hard the dance was over anyway. He thought about that now, leading his daughter across the stone floor in the amber light, holding her properly, moving with enough steadiness to manage. She rested her head on his shoulder for a moment. He put his hand on the amber bracelet. "She would have been completely useless today," he said, "crying from the moment you woke up." "She would have been wonderful," Nadia said. He didn't contradict her. He held her a little more firmly. He said nothing, which, for Park Jae-won, said everything. Across the terrace, Lee-eun watched them from a table near the edge of the light. The candle in front of him threw a small, warm circle across the stone. He had his drink in his hand, and he wasn't drinking it. He was just watching with the open, unhurried attention of a man who knows exactly where he is and wants nothing anywhere to be different from what it already is. He had grown up next door to this family without fully understanding it. He understood it now. He wasn't afraid of it. He was grateful for it, for the protection it represented, for the love at its center. For the woman it had shaped, the woman now dancing with her father in the amber light with her mother's bracelet on her wrist, and 16 years of this man's devotion in every step she took. Later, after the last guests had gone, and the caterers had begun the quiet work of clearing the terrace, and the mountain had settled fully into dark and silence, Nadia and Lee-eun stood together at the stone wall at the edge of the terrace. Seoul glittered in the valley far below. The city's lights scattered across the distance like someone had tipped out a jar of stars across the dark. The cedar trees around them moved softly in the night air. The amber bracelet caught a sliver of light from somewhere above. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. "That I've been happy," she said. "For a long time. Before tonight even. I've been happy for years." She looked at him. "Even when I was being careful about it." He looked back at her. "Me too," he said. "Even when I was being completely stupid about it." She laughed. The real one. The full one. The one that came from the stomach and refused to be polished. The one her father heard and always saw Ada-Ease in. The one that had crossed a garden hedge 24 years ago and announced itself to a small boy examining a beetle and quietly, irreversibly, changed the course of everything. Even then, she agreed. She took his hand. Below them, Seoul breathed and moved and hummed in its endless, indifferent way. Above them, the mountain was still. The amber bracelet on her wrist rested warm against his hand. The candles on the terrace behind them burned down slowly in the still air, each flame small and steady and completely unconcerned with the dark around it. That was the end. Not a summary, not a lesson, just 2 people standing at a wall in the dark, holding hands, with the city below them and the night around them and everything finally, completely right. And that is what happens. That is what happens when you reach out and grab the wrong thing. Su-min spent 3 years managing Nadia, watching her, resenting her, planning against her. And in all that time, all those dinners, All those calculations, all that careful, patient jealousy, she never once stopped to ask the simplest question available to her. Who is she, really? Not what does she look like, not how close is she to Lee Eun, not how do I compete with her. Who is she? What name does she carry? What stands behind her? She never asked. And that one unanswered question cost her everything. 2 dresses, 2 deliberate acts, 2 moments where she reached out and put her hands on something that wasn't hers to touch. And both times, the world answered. Not loudly, not with theater. The way Park Jae-won answered everything quietly, completely, with absolute certainty and no mercy at all. Because here is what jealousy does when it goes unchecked. It narrows your vision until all you can see is the threat in front of you, and it blinds you completely to everything standing behind it. The history, the name, the love, the protection. The man at his desk folding his hands and picking up a phone and speaking one sentence in the tone of a man who has never once in his life needed to repeat himself. Nadia never had to fight. She never had to defend herself. She never had to raise her voice or make a threat or demand anything at all. She simply stood still and let the world sort itself out. Because a woman who has been loved the way she was loved by the man who raised her, that woman already knows. She already knows that some battles aren't hers to fight. They're already being fought on her behalf by someone who made her a promise in a quiet hospital room 24 years ago and never once broke it. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment right now. I want to know, do you think Sumin got what she deserved? Or should it have been worse? Tell me below. Like this video if Nadia's father handled it exactly right. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe and turn on the bell. A new story drops every week. And the next one? The next one is already ready. And trust me when I tell you it is going to hit even harder than this one.